I don't know if you've ever gone to a fireworks show. They're pretty amazing, especially if you manage to get pretty close to the action. And you can actually feel the concussion from the huge fireworks as they go off, and you just feel this pressure wave hit your chest. It's really amazing and wonderful and beautiful, but slightly terrifying too, because you know that if they were to explode right in front of you, you would be toast. The passage we're going to look at today in Hebrews chapter 12 is a little bit like that in some ways. He's first going to remind them of what it was like in the Old Testament when the law was given and God's presence came down. In Hebrews chapter 12, verses 18 through 21, "For you have not come to what may be touched, a blazing fire and darkness and gloom and a tempest and the sound of a trumpet and a voice whose words made the hearers beg that no further messages be spoken to them. For they could not endure the order that was given, if even a beast touches the mountain, it shall be stoned. Indeed, so terrifying was the sight that Moses said, I tremble with fear." He's pointing out that when God's presence came down to give the law to Moses in Sinai, it was a terrifying sight. It was incredibly scary. And this was in part to motivate the Israelites to understand the reality of who God is, and that disobeying or walking away from God would have serious consequences. And the people of Israel had so many stories in their history of what had happened when the people of Israel had walked away from God. So they knew that it would be terrifying to walk away from that presence of God that had given the law. But now he's going to tell us we have actually come to something even more terrifying. Verse 22, "But you have come to Mount Zion and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to innumerable angels in festal gathering, and to the assembly of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven, and to God, the judge of all, and to the spirits of the righteous made perfect, and to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel." He lists here a number of different things that are designed to remind us of how amazing, holy, wonderful, and in a sense scary it would be if we were to reject this. As he'll go on to say in verse 25, "See that you do not refuse him who is speaking, for if they did not escape when they refused him who warned on earth, much less will we escape if we reject him who warns from heaven." The point of this is to say you cannot reject this God, or you should be too afraid to reject this God. The Bible always motivates sort of in two ways. It both places before us that which is good and glorious, and it also tells us that there will be a consequence if we disobey. Now, this is certainly true in the book of Hebrews, chapter 12. We saw at the beginning that we are to keep our eyes focused on that prize that is coming, on the glory that is to be revealed to us. And now we are also being reminded of the fear that we should have if we should fail to obey. If we should choose to walk away from this God who is saving us. We won't get into the question of whether you can lose your salvation or not, but what is clear from the book of Hebrews is that there can be people who consider themselves to be followers of Jesus, people who consider themselves to be part of the church, but who decide that they don't really want to follow God anymore. Who decide that it's too much, it's too hard, there's so much difficulty, and it's not really worth it. The challenge, I think, is that sometimes when people reject it, what they think they are rejecting is they are walking away from maybe a community that believers they have been in. They think they're walking away from some teaching that they have heard. They think that maybe they are walking away from a building that is not that impressive. And you know what? God's people often aren't very impressive. But you need to understand that anyone who turns their back on God is turning their back on something much higher and more beautiful and more terrifying than you can imagine. We have come to a heavenly Jerusalem. We are already, as we pray, in the throne room of God himself, praying to God. And when we gather together as a body of believers, I think to a degree, at least even digitally, we are proclaiming the eternal assembly. We are experiencing the foretaste of that which is truly real, the community of all the saints. I don't think many of you are in danger of walking away from the faith, but it's good to remind ourselves that any rejection of God is a rejection of this terrifying, holy, awesome, incredible God. And we should have fear for that. But we can also go in joy, knowing that this is the God who is with us.